right? The management has to believe that, okay, if we give you a promotion, you'll not use it as a stepping stone to go somewhere else. Give you a recent example again from my own company in India. What we found over the last 2-3 years, that guys that were good, we give them excellent raises, and we find that 6 months they're leaving. So why? Because he used my higher base to go even higher and leave the company. So what we did this year, we caught up with them. Said, okay, there are people who we gave 33% raise, right? So I said, okay, you will get this raise. If you want this raise fully cashed every month, then you sign a 1-year non-departure agreement with us. That means you'll stay here at least a year, right? And if you don't want to do that, anything over 15% will be held in escrow by the company. If you stay 1 year, you'll get it. If you don't, you lose it, right? So these are the kinds of things that the management has to resort to even, so those who didn't sign it immediately tells you that this guy is not maybe a long-term employee here, right? And none of them expected this kind of treatment from management, right? In a way, very creative. You think, okay, you have the raise, sign up for 1 year, you get the whole raise. If you don't, then we'll give it to you if you stay here 1 year. So the management has to have that trust before they promote you. Secondly, establishing this, and by the way, I'm saying this because Indians are weak in this, right? Through the years, I've found I've had Indian employees, I've had other employees, right? Black employees, all kinds of employees, because I've had 300, 400 people. So, first is your communication credible, right? Whatever you say, is it backed by data? Is it backed by some research, proper study, or are you winging it? Okay? And credibility of commitment, if you say you're going to do something, comes Monday and say, hey, I was too busy with something else, this and that. I personally never want to hear that, okay? I'd say that's your problem, that's not my problem. You made the commitment, you didn't deliver, right? And the worst thing that the Indians do, they go to India, say they'll be back in 2 weeks, right? And they send a letter or email or whatever. So I had a colleague at Altera who was Indian. He was from Kerala. So it happened with him. So my boss comes to me one day, he had this habit of coming to your door and starting to chat. Sometimes you feel he's wasting your time, right? He said, Bipin, you worked for me for a long time. I worked for him for 13 years, by the way. Very tough guy, between Fairchild and Altera. He said, you always tend to come on time. But Chaco always seems to have a problem. He either can't get flight reservations or he becomes sick. What do you think it is? So don't think that management doesn't know. They know. And if your relatives in India insisting, even at the expense of hurting their feelings, come back on time. Credibility, credibility, credibility. Only people that are credible get promoted and go higher. Others don't. Okay? Simple examples like this, okay? And by the way, that VP was gone within a year from Altera. He was fired. Showing commitment and dedication, whether it takes, working at night, weekend, whatever. Once you commit, you got to do it. Then, a lot of us have this habit of saying, we're being discriminated. Okay? Not true. Now, I am saying that because every job that I felt that I should get or I'm deserving, I was able to get. Okay? So it's not your color, not where you come from, right? So if your communication is good, Your knowledge is good, and most Indians are technically considered good, right? But can you communicate that, right? And so your incompetence or your inability to please your management should not be, covered by discrimination. Okay? And give you an example. There's a very, very, Kanwal Rakhi, you've heard of him, right? I'll openly say that. Now, he wanted to become the CEO of Nobel. He was their CTO, and he thought after Nurda, the CEO, retired, he should get that job. And he didn't. Okay? So he resigned, being upset and so on. Now, if you listen to Kanwal, he's a bright guy, IIT graduate, he's very, very good. But when you listen to him, half the time I don't understand him. Or, so you say, okay, if I was the board, this gentleman is very good, technically sharp, all that, right? But is he the CEO material to communicate to the investors, to the analysts, to whoever it is outside, right? So that is why a CEO job can be hampered by one little reason, and that is the communication, right? So one thing I have in one of these slides, so I say, okay, be on top of your communication, even ability to communicate things in a larger meeting, technical ideas being explained properly, etc. So the last bullet here is join Toastmasters. How many of you have heard of Toastmasters? Okay, anybody join? Okay, good. So I became member of Toastmasters in the mid-70s, right? And spent about 5 years. And that helped me quite a bit. My R's are not good though. You know what the R's are in Toastmasters?
Sure.
Okay. So Altera, I did talk about it earlier. Actually, Altera, truly speaking, was my second startup. The first one I tried to create didn't succeed. There were 3 of us, and then the CEO who became CEO of Altera was the 4th guy. He was our CEO candidate. So when he left to become CEO of Altera, 3 of us technical and operations guys were left holding this plan. We met a couple of VCs, but we didn't have the ability to, at that time, to do anything about raising money, etc. So then I sort of became Rodney's, one of his helpers in making Altera succeed, right? So in those days, again, startups were not paying very well. I took an 18% pay cut to join a startup. These days, a lot of people coming to startups want a raise. They have no idea what the startup used to be in terms of salary cut, right? You are expected to make money later on after putting in sweat equity for maybe 5 years, 6 years, or 7 years, sometimes never, right? So by the time I would try to negotiate, saying, Rodney, can you do this? He said, Vipin, he was a very, very arrogant guy. He said, I told you the salary. No further discussion. You want to come? Come. Right? So I joined. I joined Altera because of 3 things. One is I had great faith in Rodney's ability. Very arrogant guy, but very intelligent guy. Extremely intelligent. He could look at a slide and see the numbers problems like anybody else had never seen before. In a minute, he would say, hey, your number is not matching what you're saying. And we had a colleague who used to do that all the time in meetings, playing politics with his colleagues. Vipin didn't do this, So Rodney, in 2-3 staff meetings, when he became the general manager, he noticed this, that Mike always has a problem with other people, right? So he says, Mike, okay, and in those days we used to use these transparency foils, right? So I said, Mike, let me look at this slide. And I said, go to this slide. By third slide, he said, you know what? Your own numbers are not matching. Go do your homework before you tell me this in the staff meeting. So after 3 months, Mike was gone. So you really, really have to know your numbers. I mean, that's the other thing from a, I get troubled by when I ask some of my guys today saying, okay, how many defects did you have last week? They said, oh, I'll have to go look up. I said, you should have it and remember it in your sleep. So being good with numbers was something that operationally was very, very important. Yeah? So 13 years at Altera were the best career years for me. Okay? And the reason I say that is very tough, very hard, but very successful. Made the biggest amount of money that I'd ever imagined, right? And it was all done very professional. Okay? So by that time, then I felt that okay, I now want to run a company. So until then, I was not really considered qualified because I had operational experience but no sales and marketing experience. Right? So when I went to Japan to run Japan for 2.5 years for Altera, that gave me the sales and marketing experience. And I did that, by the way, at the cost of not moving my family there, because he did not, our boss in many ways was very cheap. So he didn't want to sanction an expat package for me to go to Japan and live there with my family. And he knew my mother was with me and all that. So he knew the family. So he said, this will be an expensive move, right? Plus, we had our own issues. My daughter was in high school, etc. So, so I took up that job just to get that sales and marketing experience. Gave up my operations job, right? So that made me, I thought, ready for a CEO job. Yes.
By then, how old were you when you started your first company?
Yeah, so I joined, so I was a very late startup guy. So I joined, I became a startup person around 40 years. Okay? So, and good thing that you bring me that up. I wanted to make that point. So for some people, the best time may be before you're married, before you have kids, before you have mortgage, right? And you do a startup and great, If you starve, maybe you starve, right? You don't have to worry about your kid. So that's one way to look at it. The other way is to say, okay, after I have enough of savings or some reasonable bank balance, and these days, a lot of couples are, two income couples, right? So it's easy. In my case, that was not the case, right? So once I felt that, okay, I'm now in a position to take this risk, I did that, right? Okay. So for a success at a startup, again, this is something not profound, you probably already know, but the idea and the value proposition. Is it something that really is going to sell? How good is it? The VCs or a lot of people in the industry talk about is the Me Too idea. The other term you'll hear a lot is it an aspirin or a vitamin, right? So if it's vitamin, the VCs are not too hot, right? The market. Now, sometimes the product can create the market. To me, Google is a perfect example. There was no search market as such. Right? If we had to search, we had to do a lot of other things. So it sort of created the market. This paid advertising on the internet, there was no market, right? They created the market. So some ideas will create the market, but not every idea has that capability. Right? The team, right? Now, you cannot start a company as a single person and raise money as a single person. So you have to have a team of 3 people, and the most essential people are your engineering person, your marketing person, and the guy who's going to run the company, right? The VCs want to know who these three people are. So don't even go to angels or VCs or anybody else to raise money before you know. Now these people may be working somewhere, right? But at least they identified, they're willing to put their name down, and they're willing to come to, see the VCs when a meeting is called, right? So you have to have these people lined up, and the team is, of course everybody expects intelligent, sharp people, right? Experienced, dedicated. The main thing in a startup is dedication. You will have to give up a lot of things in your life if you really are in a startup where you have to give up a lot of day-to-day conveniences and schedules and all that. So the reason for flexibility is there's a term used these days a lot called fast failure, fail fast, right? So if one idea is not working, you have the flexibility to say, hey, that's not going to work, let's go do something else, right? So does the team have that capability to change? CEO is absolutely critical, and sometimes it's better to admit that we don't have a CEO candidate. We'll go recruit one, and that's what the Altera founders did, by the way. None of them, they were wise enough to think that, hey, none of us can run the company, right? So they went and hired an outside CEO, right? I'll tell you a story about that. Then, what is the quality and caliber of the board advisors? Don't, just because somebody's your friend, don't make him an advisor, right? Make sure you're going for the best people you can find, right? The speed of execution. So I say this repeatedly, all the time to my people. So the two advantages that startup has. One is that it's a good idea, hopefully. And the second is you're able to execute so fast as a team that you are able to beat your bigger competitors. So if you take these two things away, then as a startup, what do you have? Nothing. You have less money, you have less people, you have less resources, you don't have as many good labs, right? So what is a startup? So how effectively and quickly you're able to run and with a good idea, right? So this is a very, very critical thing. Most people don't understand that. Okay. So this is something I have taken to heart. When I was president of Jain Center, how many people know Prakash Kaikwa? He's a visiting faculty at Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. Does a lot of CEO coaching, and at Thai, we used to have a Thai institute that ran to. So he invited me and said, Vipin, as president of Jain Center, tell me how some of the Jainism principles can be used in corporate life. So I came up with these three, which of course are well known, right? Samyak Gyan, Samyak Darshan, Samyak Charita, right? So the right knowledge, the right vision, and the right execution. So don't have to go too far. If you want to say, hey, what will succeed in a startup? It's these three things, You have the knowledge of the product, the market, etc. Are you able to create the forward-looking vision? And are you and your people executing it properly, right? So if everything is right, success will happen. So I was talking about this Altera founder who made a statement at the 10th anniversary, the importance of a CEO, right? So Bob Hartman is the founder who was the design VP, first design VP for Altera. So, and then Dr. Jim Sansbury was the technology. So they all interviewed their CEO candidate who was going to become their own boss, right? So when they checked reference for Rodney, the other guy said, very honestly, that he is an SOB, but he'll make you rich. And so Bob was remembering that 10 years later, that yes, exactly true. We hated working for Rodney, right? He was so, I mean, think of a guy who I would ship the best month as the operations VP, right? And in those days, there was no email at Altera yet. So comes in the morning, calls me up, said, "Vipin, good month, but your delinquency went up." So delinquency went up because some sales guy booked an order yesterday with same day delivery, which you know was impossible, right? So that's why my delinquency went up. But he, as a boss, was relentless, right? So you say, yeah, I get good marks here, but on delinquency, I didn't do so well, right? So all the time, he's such a pressure on you all the time, like a vice, right? Tightening every day. So now, I'm not saying all scenarios are good, but he always had the right reason, the right intellect, and the right logic, saying, why is this important, right? So one of the other things he used to tell us for a startup is, says, don't believe in, so startups have a lot of hype, right? A lot of hype. PR, publicity, whatever, you exaggerate things, right? Product capability is sometimes, you may know there's a problem, but we're fixing it, don't need to tell the customer right now, right? So all these things go on. So Rodney would put us right by saying, guys, don't start believing in your own BS. So if you start doing that, then you're in trouble. You have to be very realistic. The example I give in politics of starting to believe in your own BS is Meg Whitman. When she used to put out all these ads on the radio, she started believing in those, and that's why she failed. Because whatever she was saying on the radio, a lot of it was not true. Okay, coming to me, by the way, I know we are late, but we started late, so I guess, but I need to go to Napa for a wedding, so I need to leave too. So goals orientation is very, very important, okay? Now, again, a little story. Late 70s, I took a class in goal setting. It was being taught by a real estate broker, this adult education class, right? So one thing he said that was profound is that only 5 to 10% people ever set goals. Rest of them live their life, there's no goals. And he said in America, 80% of people who set goals achieve them. And that is really, really true, because in this country, if you set out to do something, you plan properly, execute properly, right, get the knowledge, you can succeed, right? So the goal setting with the action plan. Dedication, commitment, emphasis on detail. Now that, I'm very, very detail oriented, sometimes at others' annoyance. So when I ask for data, right, emphasis, data before decisions. My first boss at Fairchild, these are all gems, right? He taught me one thing. Vipin, data makes decisions. You don't need anything else. Data makes decisions. Then the corollary to that was, figures don't lie, but liars can figure. Okay? So, if you're an engineer, the most important thing for you is what we call intellectual honesty. So present the data with intellectual honesty. Don't try to twist it, don't try to massage it, don't try to, put spin on that data. Data is data, right? So if you want to say, if data is bad, admit that, hey, we didn't get the results we expected. This is the data, right? But a lot of engineers will go out of their way to finesse it. It's not going to enhance your career. Someday, it'll get caught up with you. So data before decision. Now, the normal accusation from Indians, by the way, when you ask them for a lot of data, don't you trust me after all these years? I tell them, I don't trust myself. Unless I see the data, I don't trust my judgment, right? And that's the fact. So to me, questioning somebody for data is not a trust issue. It's a, am I making the right decision issue for me? Taking feedback, being on top of things that are going on. So if you want to be a good manager, you cannot say I'm a total delegator. There are people like that do that, right? But delegation always has to be with control. Meaning, the person doesn't say one day that my boss doesn't care. He delegates and goes away, right? I delegate and check back saying, hey, where are you on this, right? Even if something was given 3 months ago, fortunately my memory is good still, I'll ask them a question saying, hey, you never got back to me on this, what's the status? So that way the employees will know that this will not be forgotten. You know, they better not try to put it under the rug, okay? And I'm considered tough and demanding, but fair. Okay? So for the sake of the company, you have to be demanding. But you can't be unreasonably demanding. And if you're demanding, you have to do the same thing with everybody. You can't have, you know, variations in that. And keeping up technically as needed. You know, if I'm not a design engineer, I don't need to know the latest and greatest in this aspect of design, but I need to know enough to ask the right questions. So management is very much strengthened with the right question. So another example, we had a new general manager at Microsoft. One of the Indian guys used to be a member of TIE and knew him very well. He said, everybody talks about Bill Gates, you know, college dropout, etc. But he said, when I interviewed with him, it was amazing as to, at the right moment in the interview, he knew what question to ask. So as a boss, if you want upward mobility, you need to ask the right questions, right? In a meeting, in a group meeting, if you're thought to be asking nonsense questions, people know after a while. They say, this guy is, you know, he wants to ask questions, but he doesn't know what to ask, right? That's the impression you create. So asking questions is important, but asking the right question is very important. And, you know, generally being well-read, right? So in a management situation, let's say if I go to a customer, right? And if I haven't done some basic homework or I don't know the history from the past, I'll not be able to create a you know, interesting conversation with them. So so besides your specific knowledge, general knowledge is also. Okay, what have I been doing after startup, etc. So just to make it short, I invested in lots of startups, made some money, lost some money, created a small venture fund, ran it for about 5 years, couldn't raise the second one because we started during the bubble era. So I and a guy by the name of Dhiman Bhayani did that. I had another wireless startup that didn't do well. Eventually we shut it down. We started the company here, took it to India, set up shop in Ahmedabad. Technology was successful, but business-wise, we couldn't do marketing and sales in India well. So, and I was busy with a lot of other things. So this was, we did try to do something, but didn't succeed. And then this Cover, where I'm involved today, started out as an angel investor, totally under a different value proposition, helped bring people like NEA and so on to invest in the company, NEA, Draper Richards, you know, some of the names I'm forgetting. And then it didn't do well. After raising 16 million or something, the founders couldn't really deliver. So one day the board, I was not on the board asked me, hey, can you do something? So in my weaker moment, I said yes. I took it upon me, and I'm still doing it. All right. So it must